We are live.
Okay.
Welcome, everybody.
Welcome
Your
back.
boy Chuck. Hey, sorry you were coming in a little delayed. I thought you were going to start it, but then there was like an awkward silence.
No, man, I live in the awkward silence. You know that.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. So I'm down with that. Go for it, Omar. Introduce us.
No, we're just coming back with a really cool guest. We've had him on the show before, talking about Aleister Crowley, 666. All the weird, crazy stuff, Jack Parsons that used to happen back in the day. Well, guess what? He's back. William Ramsay.
Welcome back, William Ramsay. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. It's great to be with you guys again.
Yeah, man. It was episode 14 last time we had you, and ever since we've been planning back. I know, back in the day, man. Yeah. Back when only my mom listened to the show, you know. and then now it's like picking up some steam and stuff like that. Where we're putting out more content, and we wanted to have you back, man, because we've been we stayed in contact and appreciate the books you sent us. By the way, every time we gave options to people on the show, they always pick your books, by the way. You're the first books that are going out. You know what I mean?
Well, thanks.
Yeah, and so if you don't know, folks, he wrote Abomination. He wrote Children of the Beast, and a lot of good stuff about William Ramsay and the murders happen. Or no, what was Abomination about?
Abomination was about the West Memphis Three, what's known as the West Memphis Three murders.
Yeah. And I actually went through Children of the Beast, and I haven't gone through Abomination, but you have a lot written. And I like your approach, William, because you have a lot of, your name says it all, William Ramsay Investigates. You do a lot of investigating, and it's not just clicking on Twitter and getting your little bullet point information from there. You do a lot of research. And
not surface level stuff,
Yes, it's not surface level at all. And so I like that because, sometimes, especially in this realm of knowledge, like what's considered to be fringe or weird or whatever, people tend to just kind of write it off as a 100% conspiracy. There's nothing actually foundational, or nothing, I should say, there's no proof for the claims that we are claiming. But if they go through your books, I think they would think otherwise. There's a lot of information in there.
And a lot of footnotes. I try to footnote all my books. Children of the Beast had like 750 footnotes. So you can see what I was reading if people want to put me to the test.
Yes, indeed. That's good. And that's great. And I think for the most part, until you were kicked off of Facebook, you were pretty easy to get a hold of,
Yeah, I know. Well, I'm going to move to Float. Apparently, you can take all of your information off of Facebook and upload it to Float. So I will be off the tyrant Zuckerberg's website permanently. Forever, and I still have all my information.
Oh, perfect. That sounds great. That sounds like something we should be doing more.
Yeah, man. Let's look into that
Float.
stuff.
Indeed.
You've written a new book, though, right, William?
Correct.
Global Death Cult. That's why you're on here today. Give us a little bit of information. It's called The Order of the Nine Angels. Atomwaffen and the Slaughter of the Innocents.
Right. So the Order of Nine Angles and Atomwaffen are both fairly recent groups. Order of Nine Angles pretty much started in the early 80s in the UK, and Atomwaffen was formulated here in the United States in 2015. And I just followed this ideology that came out of the UK, really a post-Crowley, but also kind of a neo-Nazi. It really is a neo-Nazi ideology, but with a different kind of occulted flavor to it, or an element. Yeah, so I came to my attention, a guy reached out to me for my podcast, William Ramsay Investigates. His name was Igor Sarsky. And he said, hey, this is very similar, because I had researched this series of disappearances and water deaths called Smiley Face Killers. And I'm convinced that phenomenon is real, but the motive was never, it was always vague, vacuous. Like, well, what's the motive for people abducting men and putting them in water and keeping them for a time? And so he was telling me about this group that, once you start reading through their ideas, they're just a terrible group, very Nazistic, very contemptuous of human beings, and very dangerous. And so I really started looking into it and researching it, and it led to this book, Global Death Cult, because it really is a group that is multinational. They're communicating from the US, UK, other groups, and small little, what they would call Nexians, or like almost like a terrorist cells, are in parts and nations all around the world, at least 15 or 20 nations around the world.
Now, is this like a grassroots kind of thing? Like someone started it and then did it infiltrate into?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask too.
Yeah, no, it's really kind of peculiar. I think it's a very modern event because it started with one guy named David Myatt. He's in my introductory chapter, and either he or people around him, it's kind of fuzzy. Some people make the claims that he's the sole writer, but all of these manuscripts, very small 3-page manuscripts, were being traded pre-internet through PO boxes. So you kind of had to be in some kind of underground. And I think this book is an introduction to secret underground ideologies, because Order of Nine Angles is just one, but he started out, or somebody started out, compiling these little manuscripts, and you can literally see they were photocopied and sent out around the world. And then those manuscripts grew and then got compiled into books. So it'd be like the Sinister Tradition or Naos or the Black Book of Satan. And then it became just this corpus. Right now, there's probably 10,000 pages of material for the ONA. It's very substantial. And somebody of a very high intelligence has compiled this. And then I think with the internet in the 90s, mid 90s, late 90s, I think it just really dispersed so people could access this research. And it's not like somebody's they have this idea of not copyright, but copy left, which means there's no copyright on that material. So it kind of just gets seeded around and picked up. And people in Atomwaffen, the reason why Atomwaffen's in the title of the book, this group in 2015, a real neo-Nazi group, why it's in there is because a lot of the members of Atomwaffen have picked up ideas in the ideology of the Order of Nine Angles.
So it says here, I'm reading because the
what kind of
death cult, give me a second, sorry. It says here, global death cult follows these dark ideas which have influenced the American Nazi movement, leading to murders known and unknown. Murders known. Can we talk about some of those?
Absolutely. So there's been about 5 known deaths associated with Atomwaffen. The 2 members, the guy who started, its name was Russell, and he had members from northeastern the U.S. that came down to kind of his headquarters in Tampa, Florida, and they ended up getting shot by a fellow Atomwaffen member, very close range with an AK-47. So those were 2. And the Atomwaffen, probably not a very big group, 80 to 100 people, but there's 80 to 100 people trying to get into membership. And one of those people trying to get into membership's last name was Giampa, and he was dating his girlfriend. And his girlfriend's parents said, "You got to get away from this guy. He's very dangerous." And they were right, because they caught him in their house and he ended up murdering both of them and then tried to commit suicide. So those were innocent parents who were really warning. And this book really is a warning, cautionary tale and a warning to watch out for these really dangerous ideologies. So they ended up dead. And I think that was outside of DC in Northern Virginia. And then an Atomwaffen member in Los Angeles, his name was Woodward, actually in Orange County, had an old high school friend that he stabbed to death in a park. And it was a tragic death. It seems like he lured him out, and he was Jewish, so it had a real racial component. And I think the DA's name is Rakowskis. He added on a hate crime factor to his prosecution, excuse me. But I think it's interesting because a lot of these cases are very recent, and they have not prosecuted actual Woodward. He's been in jail in Orange, California, I think since 2019 because of COVID. So that delayed the trial. So he's not even in jail. So those are 5 deaths associated with Atomwaffen. There was one murder that's known where a guy was arrested who also has not been in trial yet. His name was William von Neutrogen out of Toronto. And he is a known member of ONA or was influenced by the ONA. He had stuff on his social media that showed that he was kind of associated with one of these Nexians or chapters or cells. So he seemed to be following them. But he also and you can go to his YouTube channel right now and look up William von Neutrogen, and he's doing one of these satanic occult chants that chant C-H-A-N-T-S. Yeah. No, he's literally chanting and in front of kind of ritual implements. And so he was doing that, but he went out.
YouTube won't censor that, though, right?
Right. Excellent point. Very excellent point. So this guy's there's a literal video of him stalking this poor Muslim guy who was in front of his, what do they call it? One of the Muslim organization, and he walked up behind him and slit his throat. And he might have killed another guy by the name of Singh a week before, died in the same manner. I don't know if they've tied him to that case. So these are very recent. This happened 2020. So these are all cases, Adam Waffen and Order of Nine Angles deaths. And those are the ones we know. There's been all kinds of weird stuff that's happened in Russia. There's been church burnings and some other things that have been tied. There's a lot of people being arrested with groups that have been influenced by this far-right racist occult ideology.
Omar, you had a question?
What kind of information is being circulated? Like what type of
Like the occult stuff?
information, like what is their ideology? Yeah, the occult stuff that's propelling and like encapsulating these people's minds in order to that lead them,
funny?
that lead them to be like this.
I just watched Fight Club yesterday, and it's reminding me of this.
Yeah, no, it has. Somebody actually, I had another interview where somebody said it was like Fight Club, like an underground group, and it's interesting because if you go to Fight Club, there's this smiley face theme within the book and the film, and this group also has smiley faces. And I show that in the background of my book. This guy, Igor Sarsky, found two of their main websites had this smiley face motif associated with it. So the symbol...
You see a lot of these smiley faces in movies and connected to murders, right? Like, or people who are murderers, right?
Well, that's a great point, because that's how this phenomenon of the young men who were found in water got that kind of term of that phenomenon, was because people were finding smiley faces, right? And so that became the smiley face killers. And if you look, if you look at Ed Sheeran, very popular, well-known pop musician, his new video, Bad Habits.
Oh, that's a bad one, bro.
Yeah, have you watched that?
Yes, it's very occult and weird.
Yeah, very much. And it has themes that are very similar to the information that's in the ONA. And you can watch Ed Sheeran. You can watch that video and watch him go through these balloons, all yellow, with the smiley face, as he has shape-shifted into some kind of night being with his posse, right, or his group.
Right.
And then the sun comes up and he becomes Ed Sheeran again. It's right out of the ONA, man. It's the same kind of information. And I have a section in my book called The Concepts of the ONA. So you can read what they're thinking, what these ideas, and it's pretty clear that they, like any other occult group, they've coalesced or taken ideas from maybe other groups and things like that, like Crowley or something, but they deny Crowley. But I think that this is one of the ideas, is this idea of shape-shifting, and you become possessed. Like literally, if you're a practitioner of ONA stuff, you become possessed at night. It's really crazy.
Yeah, because that exists within the music industry as well. Like you see, like, for example, they talk about it in a very artistic sort of way, like, oh, this thing takes over me, and then I become this other person on stage. And then, the most known person, I guess you could say, is Beyonce. And she's like, oh, I become Sasha Fierce, and there's this whole...
Yeah, I mean, look at Freddie Mercury said he became a devil on stage. Like that was his person. So there's some channeling elements, very occult, non-Christian, very occult stuff. But yeah, you can see if you, like, I'm keeping my eye out for the smiley face symbol. It's in a lot of places, not just Fight Club or Ed Sheeran.
Right. Yeah, I think the one I was remembering was from the movie Watchmen. We had the comedian. He gets murdered, and then right when he gets murdered, blood lands on the smiley face. It's like part of the... It's like the iconic picture they used even for the poster to announce the movie. And of course, you watch the movie, and the people who wrote it, I mean, they're all connected to, Crowley magic and all kinds of stuff like that. So you're like...
Alan Moore, right.
Exactly. Alan Moore is connected to all that weird stuff. So it's like, oh, there it is.
Well, look at Suicide Squad, a more recent film, right? And that has the smiley face with the X'd out eyes. So if you look for that motif, it pops up all the time. Somebody here, Big J, just said. Yeah, so it's occultism. So, it's much more prevalent, and the kind of leering smile. Also, you could see that in the Joker type movie, the smiling, bloody smile. That at the very end, if you watch Joker with, what's the guy's name? Joaquin Phoenix.
Oh yeah.
And actually, the original kind of laughing, giggling Enemy was written by Alan Moore too. I think it was called Laughing Joke or something like Killing Joke.
The Killing Joke?
Yeah. Killing Joke was one of the beginning Batman comics, is my understanding.
In your research with this global death cult, do you know of people also practicing certain things like this? Because I mean, like for example, one that came to mind that's kind of prevalent in Disney movies and you see all the time in movies is like in the Joker, like you just mentioned. There's a scene where he finally is accepting who he's becoming, right? And then he's like dancing in front of a mirror, and we know in the occult, the mirror stuff is very important because it's a way of channeling beings and things like that, and they possess you and you become this other being and things like that. We see that a lot. Checkered floors, you see that in movies quite a bit, the duality and things like that. All that stuff comes from the religion of Crowley and things like that. And so it's like I'm wondering, like, are you seeing some of those things with this global death cult, or besides the smiley face stuff that you're kind of connecting?
I think so. I mean, the smiley face, I think, is definitely associated with some of the people in this group, and I think that may be a certain signal. But just to go back to the Joker, before in that movie, really popular movie, before he does his first killing, he puts out a cigar in a smiley face fashion on the wall and then commits his first death. So it seems to be associated with this kind of like laughing, murdering idea. But this group has a weird mix of occultism and Nazism, which is a lot. I mean, a lot of those top people in Nazism were occultists.
Right.
But what they did, it's not like, I think that the founder found that they're not going to have popular support after World War II. And so I think he kind of created this alternate group for smaller people to enact kind of evolutionary Nazi ideas, but in smaller groups. And everything, there's no, Nazis marching together, giving out literature, but it all is in small cells, committing acts late at night. So it's always at nighttime. And all these varying orders and varying ideas all take place kind of in forests. So you see the forest or druidic motif. And there's, it ties in like, there's other people who are Satanists who've been involved with the ONA. So people come and go. One of the guys' name is Ford, and that Ford was one of Damien Eccles of the West Memphis Threes, people he idolized. So you can see these odd connections of this group. But they have an external communication, but they also have an oral tradition where they're exchanging information face to face. And I also show they use PGP keys. So they're clearly communicating using encrypted communications. So there's some stuff within this group, I don't know, that may only be the exchange between people who have been initiated. In their fifth, so in the original documents, the beginning documents of the ONA, they called it the septenary system, meaning the 7-step system. And in that fifth system, the fifth part of the system, you literally have to kill somebody to get up to the top. Yeah. So it really is a death cult. That's the title of the book.
Go ahead, Omar.
What's the purpose of? What's their goal?
Well, a long-term goal is they have an idea.
Yeah,
they have an idea of a dark imperium. So one of their internal goals is to create a new system slowly with seeding these little Nexians or cells all over the world and put in this imperium, this kind of fascist imperium.
Religious and political in nature?
Absolutely. I mean, you could say Nazism was a religion, so they have their own religion. Man. Yeah, no, well, okay. Well, I'm glad you said that because this group believes in infiltrating different groups. So the main founder, they have this concept of insight roles. And so you join groups to infiltrate and inject ONA ideas. And the main founder went from being a neo-Nazi to strangely joining the most conservative or far most radical Muslim group, right? And to an outsider, that would be like, what is this? This guy doesn't have any real integrity. But if he had integrity to chaos and destabilization and accelerationism, then it would make sense. So some of these guys, you'll see that they have integrated really radical Muslims into this Nazi or fascist ideas. So, and you wouldn't believe it would be there, but it all comes out of the ONA, in my opinion. So the guy, when I talked about Russell and the two young men who were murdered in Tampa, Florida, the guy who shot him, Anders, became a far-right Muslim and a young person. Like, what are you doing? This guy's like how would you make that leap from kind of internet online trolling Nazi to a radical Muslim? It was very strange, and they were teasing him for it. The two guys who ended up dead, and that's why apparently he shot them.
A big concern of mine that you're bringing up is that you're saying that they're trying to infiltrate different things. I feel like this is, I don't know. It's already rough as it is right now with the left and right paradigm, and we got a lot of issues during this time since the presidency, our last presidency, and they've really been pushing that agenda of like the right they're terrorists, you know what I mean? They're domestic terrorists, and I mean I've been hearing all that is thrown around for everything now. Domestic terrorists, everything's a domestic terrorist now, and so
it sounds like a psyop, dude.
Well, part of it is, yeah, I think.
And what I'm concerned is because you say, like in the preface of your book, that it's trying to infiltrate military or American military, and so it's kind of like, how does that look like? What is it that they're trying to do, or what information have you seen that makes
I think they are these far right groups, the farthest right groups are trying to get experience in the American military. Now that's very different than a political group like the Democrats hammering on we're being infiltrated. So that's very useful for them politically. But I think these are very small fringe groups. The problem with them is they're violent, and that's what makes them dangerous, right? But there are, if you look through my book, I reference a lot of these guys who are reading The Sinister Tradition, which is a compilation of a lot of ONA manuscripts. They're in the military. They're getting training. And a lot of these guys are asking questions. People are in the National Guard. There was one guy who was during the riots in D.C. He was in the National Guard, who has ONA connections, perhaps. So I do, and I think that even the founder of Atomwaffen seems to have had ONA ideas to become these insight roles, and he joined the National Guard after starting his group. So it seems like they're trying to gain that experience from the American military, in my opinion. Yeah.
Going back to what Omar was saying, it's kind of like our Middle Eastern groups. They kind of get trained by us and then turn against us, kind of thing.
Yes. Yeah, it could happen. Absolutely. I think it's very dangerous. And these are, I think, the book is an insight into these really fringe ideas that somehow they're almost young. The Atomwaffen is very young, 19s, 20s, early 20s, and how this new environment of the internet has allowed these people to access this information. And it doesn't take, it takes 1 out of 1,000 or 1 out of 10,000. So somewhere somebody's on 4chan, 8chan, some of these weird message boards, they get brought in, and then this is like, oh yeah, this makes perfect sense to me. We are, the world is collapsing, and this is where it is. And they're very nihilistic, right? And the ideas of Atomwaffen is actually to accelerate to a post-apocalyptic world. So it's almost like a biblical element, because they really almost kind of want to bring about what the book of Revelation says.
Yeah.
Well, you can kind of see how they can go into this type of ideology based on the current culture, because if it is a neo-Nazi type of mentality, obviously these are going to be white young men. And culture right now is really harshing on young white men, saying, they're responsible for everything. Everything is white man's problem. And so that alienates them, and then they find these things online, and so that propels them even more to actually follow in to these types of ideologies. I can see how they can fall into these kind of things, man.
Yeah, I'm not optimistic. I'm not optimistic.
Yeah,
I'm not optimistic.
Do you know a little bit more about his upbringing, Atomwaffen? Because when I read, or when we talked about Crowley, you can kind of see, like Omar just said, what propelled Crowley to become Crowley. That very rigid Christian background, and all that, bad theology and things like that. And you can kind of see what helped mold him into what he became,
Right. And I think that these guys, a lot of that guy, Russell, is in jail. He's serving out a 5-year sentence. They've also just put some new guy, Dymock, in the UK, who was in an affiliated group called Feuerkrieg. There's Sonnenkrieg, Feuerkrieg, Atomwaffen. So there's all these little subgroups, and they actually got banned. Australia just banned Sonnenkrieg. And if you're a member of Sonnenkrieg, you get a 10-year sentence. So mandatory sentence. So you can't even become a member. And it's interesting because on the list of banned groups of Australia, and this is very recent, this is last month, there's about 17 radical Muslim groups and then one neo-Nazi group. So they're figuring out it's bad. But the founder, Russell, apparently came from a well-to-do family, and he either had ADHD, and there's a very predominant strain of like Asperger's, ADHD, and some of these guys. So they're online a lot. They're communicating online. They found this one site, Iron March, where a lot of them were streaming with each other and talking about things. So I think that you're right. The alienation and the modern culture is driving some of these guys to join these far right groups. So I think that the current cultural war is going to create more warfare, like literal warfare.
You had a question, Omar?
Yeah, I think that's the goal, to create all this division. No, it's just that I think that's one of the main goals is to create division, is to create chaos. And because where there's chaos, that's they can obviously, when I say they, I mean like the powers that be, the people who are actually in charge of these sub cults. They're in charge of all of these different types of groups, can find opportunities to seize more power and seize more money, seize more land.
Right. Well, look at what happened at after Oklahoma City. The changes. The current head of the Justice Department was an attorney for back then. So, and it's interesting. So it's coming around again. This guy Russell, who was with Atomwaffen, had a framed picture of Timothy McVeigh on his dresser. So a lot of these former things, and some of these guys they idealized this guy named James Mason, who was a literal American Nazi who wrote a book called Siege, which was a compilation of his missives from 1980 to 1986. And so you'll see siege culture, but they all like siege. And two of the main guys in Atomwaffen actually make this kind of like almost like a Hajj to go see this guy and take pictures with him. So he's really kind of their idea. But it's interesting because in his book, he was an advocate of the lone wolf Nazi serial killer, of whom there were a number of them. There was a guy by the name of Spizak, who very strange person, but like randomly shot people. There's another guy by the name of, I think, Reynolds, who shot Vernon Jordan. If you remember him, he was friends with Bill Clinton, and also the pornographer who's in a wheelchair. I think he's still alive. I can't remember his name offhand, but it's very strange. So these kids who are coming up, very naive, in my opinion, very naive, not a lot of experience, are absorbing this kind of past information. And
you think the growing of this, because you said a lot of this stuff is kind of happening as of late, recently.
Yeah. Last couple of years, yeah.
Yeah, you think it's, I don't know, maybe on purpose? Because in the last 4 years, everyone became a freaking Nazi. If you were any form of right-leaning person or conservative, you know what I mean?
You get labeled a Nazi, right? Yeah.
Right. So it just seems like, oh, well, they came along. Like, you think that was just timing, or is it just one of those things? Or
well, I don't know. I think that there's definitely, his name was Larry Flint. Thank you, Fire Pixie. He was shot by a Nazi kind of shooter who knew this guy, James Mason, knew who his name was. But it gets kind of deeper. You're kind of in an intel background. Where are these groups being puppeteered by intel agencies, and being used? I actually had a guest on my show and talked about how Rockwell, who was really the head of the Nazis, was funded by a member of the Rockefeller family. So he was clearly being puppeteered or led on. And so all of his missives and stuff that was paid for and he was shot and killed by his own fellow Nazi in Arlington, Virginia. But George Lincoln Rockwell was his name. So what's behind this group, and what's the intelligence and the purpose behind this group? There may be something deeper. I think that some of these groups in this, I want to be delicate. Some of these groups are honey traps by the government, in my opinion. So
I see. That's what it feels.
That's exactly what I was gonna say, and that's what I was gonna lean towards. That they're like real honey traps, because a lot of these things are perpetrated by the government, man. That's all I know. people
and you're right. I mean, here's the thing: it's like
that all of them, but some of them are,
Well, I mean, look at the opposite. So if Hitler comes to power and a month later the Reichstag burns down, and it's to his advantage to blame the communists, so he puts them all in jail. What about the other side of the coin? If you're on the left, you want to demonize the right or the Nazis, and they may play into your hands to give you even more power. Does that make sense?
No, yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's
no.
kind of like I don't know if you heard recently there was an attack on there was a attempted assassination on the governor of Michigan, and
Right.
the FBI heroically came in and saved the day. But what they didn't tell you is that the FBI set it all up. The FBI coerced them, the men, to do that. They paid the lunches, they paid for the hotels, they paid for a lot of stuff, and they were coercing them in order to like pretty much get out of them, hey, yeah, you know what, we do want to do this to the governor. And then that's when they all came in and raided them and took them up, and it so happened to be during the election time, and everybody was screaming, hey, check out these people, look at these Nazis are trying to kill the governor, these far right lunatics. And so yeah, the FBI and all these three-letter word agencies do a lot of these things. They honey trap, they coerce, they find people who are already on the edge, and they kind of like give them a nudge off. You know what I'm saying?
Agreed.
And so
Yes.
there's all these things going around in the background. Now I'm not saying this example of the Atomwaffen and the 9 angles are that, but we can see a lot of examples of it, and we need to be aware of
Yes.
these things. How even within our own government, these people are trying, from their point of view, you can see they're trying to do the good thing. But I mean, come on, man.
No, you make excellent points. I mean, I don't want to say some of the stuff online, but I think some of that's happening. You got to be really aware about, like, the kids too are they're not even pawns. They're just played by the governmental agencies in the harshest way. And it's really unfortunate because some of them are going to go to jail. And a lot of them, like you said, I think there was a book by one guy who just showed how many of these terror plots were started by the FBI. I got to go find it. Edmonds Aronson was his last name. I got to find the book. But it's incredible, man. It's just so many people. Yeah, one guy, JS, says, go back, look at the 93 WTC bombing. Total FBI setup. Yeah, so...
what? This is just something, it's kind of a side note, but I just want to bring it in just because I feel like once you start doing this kind of research, it's funny because, I'm looking at the books on my shelf right now. I got your books right here, William. I got Gary Wayne's Genesis 6 Conspiracy. I got Carl Tykrip's Game of Gods, and I got Demons by Michael Heiser. I got all these books right here, and they almost seem like they're not related, but they connect. They connect. You know what I mean? Like there's things happening in the background that connects all of these situations, even like global death cult, and men specifically getting involved in things like this. And like going back to what I was saying, it reminds me of Fight Club. Like there's something so important there that the main character, he didn't know his father.
Tyler Durden.
Right. Yeah, Tyler Durden, but the other guy, the actual actor, not Brad Pitt, gosh, whatever his name was, Edward Norton.
Edward Norton, yes.
Yeah, his character, they asked him, Tyler Durden asked him about his father, and he didn't know him, and he's like, oh, I don't know my dad, and things like that, and there's like there's a perfect recipe of the destruction, not just of like the family, but also very specifically, I see like there's an intentional destruction of men or masculinity in a sense, you know what I mean? Because that way you can kind of use the mind of that man to do anything else, and it's always interesting to me. You mentioned earlier there was a connection with a pornographer that, same thing with like the whole pornography industry right now is a huge psyop, obviously, because it's absolutely free, you know what you mean? And everyone can just binge on it. And it's just like, I feel like it's definitely a tool for degrading all of man. You know what I mean? Like, let's just degrade everyone, and then because of that, everyone becomes more malleable, to ideologies, to different things. And, we see studies about testosterone dropping, almost 50% in the last 40 or 50 years or something like that. And I feel like all of it might seem like I'm just ranting on, but it's like all of it is connected in one way or another, or at least it's abused in order to make, men do things that they normally wouldn't do if and when they came from a very, solid background and they weren't systematically being attacked or destroyed. Like it goes beyond the family. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
But
Yeah.
Omar, you had a question, or can we move this forward?
No, yeah, I had another question about so you talked a little bit about the Atomwaffen. What's up with the 9 angles? The order of the 9 angles. You don't.
Well, the Order of 9 Angles goes back to the UK. So that's the earlier kind of group that's influenced the more recent group, Atomwaffen, and its offshoots. But the Order of 9 Angles, really, the angles are this idea of there being angles between the planets, and then they have this concept of these portals. So you're supposed to draw down these old chaos gods from Mesopotamia and bring them into our realm. So it's a very hardcore. It has a satanic element, but it also has this Lovecraftian element.
Yeah, is that part of the? I'm looking at the cover of your book, and I can see what looks almost like a pentagram.
Yeah, it's almost like a pentagram is their symbol. Yeah, that's the 9 angles symbol.
That's the 9 angles. Yeah, that's what I'm looking at here, and it actually reminds me of kind of like the Kabbalah tree kind of thing as well.
The guy who started it was actually very ethnocentric. So he did not like Crowley didn't have a problem integrating Jewish occultism, but this guy doesn't have anything. It's all very Anglo-centric or something. So he has this idea, not the Kabbalah tree of life. He has the tree of word, WYRD, which is somewhat synonymous with fate. So this is like your tree of your fate. So there's a lot of stuff that he brought into that.
Kind of play on the Bible, the Bible, a little bit.
Well, his idea. So he has this idea of this, and so the Nazis had their idea, like they were better than everybody, they were master race. But he has this idea of they're going to be Homo Galacticus, so they're going to triumph over their enemies and seed the planets of the galaxy. And there's Homo Huberiati, or these what he perceived as arrogant people, and they are people who can be put on the for culling, which is really a husbandry term, but be killed. And so they have different steps of these people being killed, how you select an Opfer, they call it, which is a German word for sacrifice. So he definitely had this kind of us and them mentality, super adversarial, and they were special, and everybody outside of who isn't an ONA is Dross, human.
In your research, were they ever successful like Crowley in reaching an entity or a chaos god? Because we heard Crowley get ideas from AWAS,
right,
and things like that. Are they just saying that they do and they move forward with this, or?
I don't feel like I didn't see anything where they were getting information from a god like Crowley had, AWAS in 1904. It just seemed like there's a little bit of mystery. He said he found a book in like 1974 that was about dark gods in Mesopotamia, and there's 21 of them, and he integrated them into the original corpus. They had all these other kind of things that seem to have died out as the group has morphed. Like they had the Stargate, which they actually can use as a form of cryptography. So it was very smart. There was a very intelligent guy, but. Yeah, I don't see anything there that they were really in community. They were supposed to presence these dark gods, but there wasn't as much seemingly like in 1985, I presenced this dark god and he told me this. Didn't seem like there was much of that.
The common trope or the common like end result of always reaching out to another god or gods entities other than like the biblical god usually leads to some kind of worldwide conquest, and it's just interesting because especially if you read like the unseen realm stuff and you understand, Psalms 82, Psalms 89 and Deuteronomy 32 worldview, you kind of see how they can. You kind of see like they are actually probably talking to these real entities or whatever, because these fallen entities that we're dealing with have that in common, where they want to take over the world, like they want their land back. It's like a cosmic geography thing, like a gang, like spiritual gang wars, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I always feel like there's like, when you watch movies, like I always feel like I was watching I'm trying to go through the 007, the Daniel Craig ones. I'm trying to go through them right now, and I forgot which one it is where he actually infiltrated one of the round table meetings of like a New World Order type organization that they wear the octopus symbol ring or whatever, which is all
Spectre
connected
or whatever.
to
Spectre.
Right, Spectre. There you go. He actually makes it up there, and they mentioned, there's New World Order trying to happen and whatnot, and they work together with things. And you see in part 2, they're faking droughts in order to promote a United Nations type green company.
Deal.
Well, that sounds familiar. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But what my point is that, like, every time these cults or Aleister Crowley type fellows or anybody reaches out to these other quote unquote entities, it just, there's always that same plan that was like in the Old Testament, like, hey man, let's go back and let's dominate the land. Let's take over. You know what I mean? And it just makes it's just so curious, because I can't even see, or read anything now without that lens, because you can kind of see like, oh yeah, it makes sense that this global death cult is trying to become, I think, what did you call it? Not totalitarian. What did you call them?
Yeah, like an imperium, a dark imperium. Yeah.
Or they're trying to seed everybody to become, and I'm just like, yeah, okay, that sounds right. That sounds like the end result of what they would want to do if and when they're contacting these entities. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I mean, some of these rituals, like you're supposed to go lie down for a night. You're supposed to presence these things within inside you. There's a lot of bloodletting. So I think that, and if you look at some of these groups, like one of these Nexians is in, I think, South Carolina. It's called the Temple of Blood. And their books are like Iron Gates are just all apocalypse, end of the world. It's really post-apocalyptic nightmare type stuff. So that's really what they're gunning for. And they have masks and skull masks they wear, kind of like Death's Head of the Nazis. So you'll see that imagery there. You also see kind of like this Noctulian. They call it a Noctulian, which is a Noctulius is a bat. So they have this concept of being bat-like, so you fly at night and see everything that nobody else sees. And all of their stuff happens late at night, like all their books and they have this like learning fiction that's really almost like an Aesop's fable. It's supposed to teach you something, but it's obviously fictional. But it's like, who runs this town? And there's guys traveling. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, you can listen to the 3 interviews I've done with Sarsky, because he's got all this stuff down. He understands a lot of the kind of mythos of the Nazis and the ONA. But like these groups, they go out, they're talking about avoiding CCTV video. They're going to another town where nobody knows you. All this stuff, like they're teaching these people how to be expert criminals. It's incredible.
I have one more question about this specifically, and then Omar, if you have another question, we'll go from there. But I'm wondering.
No, go ahead, man.
How is this getting spread? Period. Like, how do they go about it then? Like, how are they spreading this gospel or this message of hey, let's move this forward? Is it invitation only, or like how are they reaching out? Like,
well, that's a good question. So they originally, like pre-internet, they would get these missives, and people would see if they want to be owned or a member of the order, and then the order would suss them out, and then they would have to fulfill certain things to join the ONA. And then with the advent of the internet, it just spread it around. So maybe if you're in occult circles, somebody would say, yeah, I know this group and I'm a member of the OTO, but I'm also know this guy in the ONA. Are you curious? And then they would reach out to you. And it just kind of grew and metastasized like that. As far as Atomwaffen is concerned, everything was from the far right. People were communicating through the internet, but you would have to move up in membership and become an actual member in the 2-tiered system, my understanding. You would have to do these leafleting things. So they have these posters, and you can just type in Atomwaffen posters into Google. they have these posters. These guys with young kids, would go, 18-year-old people would go and post them at colleges and things like that. And that was there, and they would show a picture of that. It seems like they would show a picture of that to somebody higher up in Atomwaffen, and that would be their kind of entryway to initiation and become an insider. But there's a lot of steps within the ONA. Like I said, it's a septenary 7-step way, the original way it was planned. So I don't really know what the mechanics is. There's been maybe one whistleblower who's talked about it, but it's a very small group. I mean, I think that only there was a scholar or an academic who researched the group and said its membership is probably only 1,000 to 2,000 people globally. But I don't really know. But it's very strange because there was a preset ideology within the ONA, but it's spread out. So you could have people who are just independents who don't really even want to join the group, but are integrating their ideas into their life.
Omar, do you have a question, or can I move this forward?
No, man. Yeah, keep moving forward. Yeah.
All right, cool. This is incredibly interesting, and I'm sure there's tons of information in your book, Global Death Cult, and I want people to check it out for sure, and we'll leave all that information later for the people that want to check it out. And but I kind of want to talk about something that's kind of been nagging at me more, and you're kind of an expert when it comes to these things, and I wanted to get into it a little bit. Is the numerology stuff kind of found when certain things happen, even with like going back to 9/11 and things like that. One of your most I don't know if it's your most popular book, at least it was one of my favorites, is the one where you talk about stuff like that,
Right. That was my first book, Prophet of Evil.
Oh, Prophet of Evil. Okay, it's your first book. Okay. And so
2010.
So where do I start? Okay, so here, the biggest thing that I've been talking about lately, and I kind of post on our Instagram page, is numbers always seem to line up when certain tragedies happen. You know what I mean? And in the occult, especially if we believe that these people are doing very planned events in order to social engineer whatever agenda they might be having, even if they're at odds. I always believe like there's a Game of Thrones situation happening in the background of people who want to be in charge. You know what I mean? It just feels that way, at least, because they all have their own agenda. Like this new global death cult might be at odds with somebody else because, who knows,
Right.
But my point is I see these numbers pop up quite frequently, and especially if you get into the number stuff. I see 93 happening a lot. I see 33. I see 47. I see a lot of these things happening. And for example, important number, and quite often it happens quite a bit, is 322, which is a Skull and Bones reference, right? And usually on March, 22nd, something very specific happens somewhere around the world. I think there's terrorist attacks, there's different things, and it's just like, dude, what's going on with these numbers?
Right.
And why? What are they connected to? Why are they important? And things like that. Like, let's go back to the OG one. Let's go back to the Twin Tower situation. 93rd floor, right? Oh, one of the planes, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, William, went into the 93rd floor.
Pretty close, yeah.
Yeah. And so what's the deal with that? Why does that matter? And why should I even care about these numbers? What's going on with it?
Well, it's good because, the whole 9/11 was like full of numerology that references occultism and Crowley particularly. But the first plane that hit the Twin Towers was Flight 11, right? And then the other one was Flight 175 hit the second tower, right? And both of those towers are 110 stories tall. You can look that up. So they're just a giant 11 in the sky too. And 11 was the number most important to Aleister Crowley. If you're really bored, you can go check out an article I wrote about the occultism of false flag terror in 9/11. It's the title of the article is False Flag Terror and the Occult Connection. Let's see if I can bring this up. But it answers a lot of the questions I think you're asking, because all of these dates, there were all of these false flag terrors that happened during the Bush administration. So you had the Cole bombing, Crowley's birthday, 10/12, 9/11. You had Bali bombings on 10/12/2002. If you remember those, the Madrid bombings were 3/11. The 7/7 bombings of London, 2005. A man Jordan was 11/9, and then 2008, 8/8 was the attempted war with Russia using Georgia as a proxy. So there's all kinds of stuff there. But yeah, so those dates are, if you are an occultist and you believe in these numbers, I mean, the prime number of Crowley is 11. So you'll see that. But 93 was also his number. So when he was using gematria, which is a way to apply a number to certain words, the two primary words of his kind of doctrine in Greek were agape and thelema, both added up to 93. So you can see that number is very important to him. So you see, and the numbers of 9/11 were 1177, 175, 93. 77 is the number of Babylon, the kind of feminine idea of their idea of God. Babylon and the beast can join together. But you'll see, if you look at Crowley's Seal of Babylon, it's a 77. And if you look at his Liber 77, book 77, very important number to Crowley, but he states there's no God but man. But yeah, so you see that whole Crowley element right there in that one.
Right, that's kind of my point. Like I try to bring this up because these things seem driven by another ideology, and sometimes it's like religious or occult in nature, like this. You know what I mean? And there's so much ritualistic evidence for it that it's too much to say this is a coincidence. You know what I mean? And when you start looking into certain members in political realms and the types of things they like to read, the types of things they like to promote, the words that they say, like if you go back, if you listen to some of like George Bush's, for example, like his speeches, he actually kind of references a lot of little occult or new age.
Yeah, no doubt.
Kind of words, you know.
What does he say? I'm the entity in the whirlwind or something. He says all kinds of stuff.
Oh yeah, he says a lot of weird things that just sound almost spiritually inspirational, you know. And then you might even chalk it away to like mis amigos.
He shakes his little shoulders and goes, mis amigos. I remember that.
If you don't want to read my whole book, you can go to my website and research September 11th, the Occult Connection, and you can just see it. And so important, the 9/11 event really was an earth-shattering, world-changing event, and I think it was intended to be that way. So,
WilliamRamsayInvestigates.com.
Yeah, that's correct. So you can see all the numbers and all what he said. 77 is the supreme and septenary in its nature. We talked about septenary in the Ordo Ane, and it's the symbol of the devil, then the Tarot, the goat of the Sabbath on an altar. 77 infernal names of the devil in the Satanic Bible by Anton LaVey. So that's just all there.
Are these so quick question, William. So are these cults, what are they like in their minds? What do they want to achieve by doing these ritualistic murders?
Well, it's a good question. I think that their goal is really to fulfill what a lot of great leaders really wanted to, and that is total control of the earth. And so that's really the new world order. It's kind of the old world order, some people have said, but is to really predominate. And then I think the ultimate goal is really their version. I mean, it's interesting because Crowley adopted and adapted so many things from Revelation into his system, but I think that they're okay with fulfilling the book of Revelation from a satanic angle.
Yeah, you know what?
And do they themselves?
Go ahead.
Yeah, do they themselves think that obviously you can't speak for them, but from what you've read and what you understand, they themselves believe that they're going to be in charge, or do they think that, or do they not understand that they're just pawns in like this greater game?
Well, I think that you can go back from the the original kind of temptations of Christ by the devil, and is this God has given me this realm, I say whoever gets in power, and I think that that's their trade-off. So I think that the earthly realm in this time, this era, is a lot of those people sell themselves to the devil for earthly power, and they may have to do certain things to maintain that power. And so they might learn all this stuff. I mean, 9/11 was very powerful,
Yeah.
magical ritual, paralyzed people. Even if you believe the cover story of that Bin Laden did it, it was a paralyzing, terrifying event for everybody. If you know that story is fake, it's even more paralyzing and terrifying. So I see that there, and I mean the aggregation of money that was done in the transference of $7 trillion for the war in Iraq. I mean, you can just do the numbers of how much of that was skimmed off. The payoffs of that event and the changes and everything that happened in the country. George Bush at that time, probably in the world, was the most powerful person in the world at that time. Really, more powerful than Alexander, Hitler, anybody at that time, from 2000 to 2008.
I see the parallels now with the type of fear propaganda they were pushing during this time. I mean, this was actually terrifying. I remember seeing it when I was in high school. You know, I was probably junior. High school. Yeah, I was in high school, and then I saw the whole event, and then we ended up going home, things like that, or whatever. But I remember just now how they're using a lot of it to push this whole great reset that's happening. You know what I mean? And because in 9/11, when that happens, so many things happen technologically in order to push kind of this new world order type government. You know, we were okay with a lot of things because we were so afraid, and so a lot of things kind of set the foundation for something else in the future, which I believe now that's where we're going. That's what's happening, with this whole Rona situation.
They're trying to do the same thing with the Rona.
Right.
And there's a lot of money getting transferred. It's the biggest transfer of
billionaires,
wealth.
bro. Yeah, you're right. Biggest transfer in wealth in history. It was $4 trillion was spread around. I mean, they really put the fear on, zapped people's brains, and did the whole
even
trick.
Shown, like, I was even seeing a lot of older folks saying this is our 9/11. This is our, you know what I mean? And it was just like, I felt like it was very intentional, where they're trying to push this so that we could be kind of pushed into this great reset, and more than ever do we see, I work for Coca-Cola, right? And there's a lot of things changing within the company because of what's happening with this whole Rona situation, and there's a lot of technology changing. There's so much changing within our company, how things are going to be set up because of what happened. You know what I mean? Because of this whole pandemic situation. Right. And I'm just like, and I could just see how all of that, especially if I started following the World Economic Forum on YouTube, and it's kind of scary looking at their videos and seeing their plans, knowing what you know what I mean?
Right.
I'm kind of like, that's super scary. I'm seeing Klaus Schwab right there just saying, this will conduct revolutions coming, you know what I mean?
And he's part of the aristocratic revolution. So he's pictured with all kinds of leaders, the same New World Order people, probably, who are okay with what happened in 9/11. And I mean, I go back even in this article, it's Crowley's ideas. It's you'll observe that I am advocating an aristocratic revolution, and so I am. That's his view. So this whole New World Order view, and even the Rona, is to maintain the patriarchal aristocracy over a slave state, which basically, I mean, how many people can take a $500 hit to their finances? Like 50% of people would be thrust into homelessness, right? So, I mean, all the homeless is a sign of this success of this aristocratic revolution.
It's funny that you say that. That's exactly how much I lost because of the money the company trying to save money. You know what I mean? They were like, well, we can't pay you this extra bonus that you got, and it's gonna be like, it was $500 less, and it was like, oh snap, you know what I mean? But luckily I've been able to maintain myself, but still, like, it has been a problem, especially when I started asking people, because I have a lot of friends in the lower income. I wouldn't say friends, but acquaintances at least, that they're in the lower income bracket, and once I start talking to them, I can understand how this is all of this can be incredibly overwhelming, and it's one of the reasons why people are also not going back to work, because they're getting so much help from the from the government. So,
right.
And so it's kind of like we have issues with that too. I can't we can't produce enough because of the amount of people buying stuff for home, because we sell obviously more than soda. We sell waters, Powerade, all kinds of different things, and
Right.
so it's just kind of like a domino effect of things happening because of this whole Rona situation. And I can see, that, well, now I understand that it was completely planned in order to push forward this new era, you know what I mean, of technology and all that good stuff,
Yeah. No, I mean, it's all a big push. All those guys together. Brzezinski, the Technotronic Era is one of his books. The Grand Chessboard, Hyper Occultic. You can see on the screen, if you brought up Fight Club, this is from Fight Club. Remember the spherical caryatid rolled down and came into Starbucks?
Yeah, well, not only that, he attacked the corporation and the banks,
Right.
because it was supposed to take out a coffee shop, and also it was like a building that had to do with a bank. So the whole thing, like watching
1999. Oh yeah, no, it foreshadowed 9/11.
Yes, indeed, and so there's so many things that I saw, and not only that, like the ending scene where all the towers came down. You know what I mean?
Right. The final two towers. The final two towers are the two towers of Los Angeles. They're the 1920. I can't remember. It's right there at the Avenue of the Stars. They're hinting at it right away, man. Go watch that again. The last part of that sequence is it coming down, and he's with a woman. It's a man and the woman, right? So you got like a little bit of gender things there going on, and I mean, read the book. If you go read the book by Palahniuk, at the end he shoots himself in the face, and his face becomes a big smiley face.
There you go. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's just like the more you know about the symbols. That's why I brought up the numerology, because it's like it comes up so often and people don't notice it because it's hidden in the dates or hidden in the day, or so many days happened after this other day. Like, for example, like were you aware about like of the numerology connected to like the George Floyd situation?
No, tell me about it.
So I'll send you some links. It's too many to talk about, but basically, there's a connection someone made between what was it, Omar? Like, do you remember how long he was on his neck for? That he was connected to something in 9/11. Do you remember that? I forgot the numbers exactly. I'll send it to you. But
here's some more numerology in Fight Club.
Yeah.
Go ahead. There's more numerology in Fight Club. That is Tyler Durden's a 5 and a 6, right? He adds up to 11. So his alter ego is basically a magician. Go read the book. I mean, I did a lot of inquiries into Fight Club for my documentary Occult Hollywood. So if you want to go to Vimeo and type in Occult Hollywood Volume 2, you can see how far-ranging in the book, and it's all about human sacrifice. The soap is about sacrifice. It's about sacrificing people. They talk about it. And it's much different than you'd think.
No, that freaked me out when you realize he makes soap out of people's bodies.
Well, so there's a sequence in the book where he says the human sacrifices in Ireland with the fat. It's very grotesque, but the fat would render out, flow down the street, and people would pick it up and make soap. So that's the intimation. That's what they're referencing is sacrifice.
Well, that was one of the things to be part of his death cult, pretty much. You know what I mean?
Right. You're right. It's kind of a monastic death cult, right?
Yeah, and in order to get in it, you have to do all these things, and then one of it was a human sacrifice, and it was just like, goodness, man, it's just so much to do with this 11. And someone mentioned in the chat earlier, Jesus was born on 9/11, and there's a lot of speculation that they do things intentionally to counter the biblical stories, you know what I mean? And that's why they're occult rituals, because it's likely he was born on 9/11, and so this is a good time to do our own sacrifice, and almost and someone had tied it to like the day of Pentecost, you know what I mean, where they like almost 2,000 people died or something, and then there's this whole situation between when the Pentecost happened and 9/11. There's all these connections with numbers, and it's the same thing. And so also the number 33, Jesus died at 33, you know what I mean? So I hear like in their occult beliefs, a lot of them, they'll do things like that because it's kind of like celebrating the fact that the quote unquote savior of the world died at 33. So it was like almost like pronouncing their victory over the so-called savior of the world, which is why they do things in 33s as well,
Right.
and
Well,
things like
it
that.
is interesting because this group, the Order of Nine Angles, has and all of these groups do, whether it's Hubbard, Scientology, OTO, Crowley, is a real hatred of Christ, and they would call him a Nazarene. And they have a special animus towards Nazarenes and Christians. So it's part of their doctrines is really a hatred of that. We would call it maybe Judeo-Christian. So they wouldn't actually point it out as like a ethnic group, but as an ideology, they hate Christianity, the Order of Nine Angles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is interesting. Omar, you got another question? It's too delayed over there on his side. It's all good. I guess not. It's no questions there. Well, we had you on for
just listening. A delay, but
Yeah.
you got in. It's good.
All right, cool. I just barely came in, and yeah. So, well, we've had you on for about an hour or so already. Is there anything specifically you want to mention about your new book that you could have got into, but we didn't? And
Well, I mean, there's a lot of information there. A lot of it's unique. I think it's important for people to understand that these weird subgroups are going to be more prevalent. I mean, you've seen cults in the past, recent past, but this is a particularly dangerous group. And also the far right ideology. You don't want your family members involved in it. It rots your brain. I likened it to like a dark book from some horror movie. When people get in touch with this, it changes their lives and their lives of people around them too. So you got to really watch out. And you don't want to get caught up in a honey trap by the government either, which should keep you out of some of these far right groups.
Right.
Some of them I will not name, but you don't want to get suckered and played like a chump, and become somebody's really kind of pelt. Like literally, they will scalp you and dance around you if you're 18 and you fall for some of this nonsense. So you got to be super careful. You can get my book. The formatting's all been fixed. I had a total formatting nightmare when I uploaded it. They changed the documents. Kindle Create is now their new thing. They used to just scan my books. I like pictures. They used to scan it, so I had to go back through it over. I actually spent more time formatting this book than writing it, but I fixed all the formatting, so you can get it at my website, WilliamRamseyInvestigates.com. And all my films and documentaries are available now on Vimeo under William Ramsay. I've got 5 documentaries and 5 books now.
Nice.
Yeah, awesome. I highly recommend it. Like I said, you got Children of the Beast. That stuff that comes out of all the children that are connected to Aleister Crowley. Prophet of Evil is one of my favorites. And just if this numerology stuff really interests you, I think it's a good place to start is with your books, in my opinion, because you give a more like I said, a very well investigated connection to numerology and things like that. So I really appreciate the work that you do, and thanks for coming on with us today, man.
My pleasure. It's great to be with you guys again. Let's do it again sooner than later.
Yes, indeed.
Man. Thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's great to be with you again.
All right, folks, hang with me, William Ramsay, and let's let these folks listen to some music, and we will be right back.
Okay, I'm ending the broadcast. Okay.
Got it.
Okay, ended.
Sounds good.